you're, like Pastor Bob had said, you're probably wondering what the flowers are doing up here. And as you were walking in, you maybe had that fragrance hit you in the face and you were like, oh, this is just a beautiful day. And you would absolutely be correct. And as we're going into this morning, we just wanted to explain a little bit to what was going on with the flowers. I don't know, maybe you have a neighbor that you have a hard time with sometimes, because I know I've got a couple of those that live around me. And have you ever had that feeling or that calling that you were supposed to have a conversation with them, but you just can't find that way to break through that wall? Well, this is one of those ways that you're going to be able to have that. It's kind of hard to have an attitude and bitterness when you see a man or a woman walking up to your door with some flowers or food, right? Anytime I've ever seen that, I've always been so excited to answer the door, you know, when my neighbors have brought over food before. So without any further ado, let's give a good, warm welcome to Dennis Maloney so he can explain to you exactly how the Flower Pot Ministry is to be. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks, Joe. It ain't me. It's I think we all have callings, and we're all called to reach out in different ways, and this is one way I do it. So yesterday, Joe and Matt came over, and I have about 750 pots, and most of those are filled with flowers. And some of them were in the back garden that I didn't even plan on bringing. So two U-Hauls show up, and so we figured might as well fill them. I wanted to mention a few people: Matt, Joe, Chris, Sandra, McKaylin, Hunter, and this morning Gianna and Max. So, and without them, it wouldn't have happened, because I was at the end of my rope. At the end of the day yesterday, I just crashed as it was. So without them, and then they kind of got a little over exuberant, so we had them all over the church. But the whole idea is that we want to get the message out that come back to church, basically. So even for those who haven't been to church, we wanted them remind them that there is a God out there, and there is a banquet. And I just like to briefly recite a parable of the wedding banquet. And we are a part of this. If you listen to this parable and put yourself in the place of the servant, because we are all servants, called to spread the word. And this is just one easy way. This is a way of spreading the word. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who he had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants, that being us, and said, 'Tell those who have been invited, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle have been butchered. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off to the field." So the lesson here is that even though we may not get a positive reaction, we don't know what the seeds, so to speak, that we plant will come to fruit later. And so that's the way I look at it. It's a matter of faith that we plant the seed, and that's all we need to do. That's our part. It's not the reaction. I'm not a salesperson. I don't like going door to door selling things. But we're not called to do that. We're just called to reflect God's love in this particular way. So one thing I will say on a practical matter, these plants do require light. So right now they're going into a bit of shock. So if you don't have a chance to get out today, please just let them outside. I know there's not much sun today. And also, they need to be watered pretty much daily. But don't be, I know some people are afraid of potted plants because of the care. It's all right. I mean, they're being sacrificed for a good reason. So even if they don't make it, they're the sacrificial plant, I guess you could say. So with that,
So awesome. A couple of things. Dennis approached me and said, Pastor Fall, how do you feel about a pot ministry at your church? I thought, Dennis, I don't think we have enough room for the amount of people that would bring if we started a pot ministry at a church. He said, no, how about a flower pot ministry? And we talked about it, and he did it last year, and I think the idea is so wonderful. The world is ugly. It's an ugly place if we let it be. Here is somebody who feels called into ministry and plants some seeds and diligently worked and thought about you. He doesn't even know you, but thought about you, and that's what ministry is. It's planting seeds and letting the seeds grow, letting God take root in people's lives. So that's the idea behind this. So if you would, please grab a plant or 2 or 3 or 5 and take them and bless somebody with them. If your wife can be tamed by flowers, your neighbor is not going to shoot you on the way up the drive when you have flowers in your hand. Pastor Joe's exactly right. So big round of applause for all those that are involved in this. What a great thing. And we want to give you the opportunity to serve. So if you have great ideas, another extremely powerful ministry is our ladies who make meals for grieving families. You don't have to be here, but if you'd be willing to make a dish, I'm telling you, that is so powerful. And it seems we never do just one service, we do several in a row. And that can be laborious and taxing. So would ask that you consider serving in that manner as well. I'm going to share today's focus scripture, and then we'll circle back around to that for the message here. It's going to be in chapter 12. We're going to close out chapter 12 today, starting in verse 44, all the way through 50, says this, and Jesus cried out and said, whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. And whoever sees me sees him who sent me. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. If anyone hears my word and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. The one who rejects me and does not receive my words has a judge. The word that I have spoken will judge him on the last day. For I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment, what to say and what to speak. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. What I say, therefore, I say as the Father has told me. May the Lord add his blessing to the scripture reading this morning. All right, thanks, Pastor Joe. We are going to finish John chapter 12 today. We've been just diligently working through the Gospel of John. Just a phenomenal gospel. All of them are great. John is particularly special because it's unlike the other Gospels. It's written by John towards the end of his life. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have already been written. And John is reflecting about his relationship with our Savior. And what he's doing is he's trying to convey who Jesus said he was. He's got a heavy emphasis on that. Now, the last time we talked, Jesus began to address the public for the last time. This is the last time he's going to publicly address people. And we're going to catch the tail end of that today. He's proclaimed that his hour has come. He knows where he's going, and he knows it involves a cross. And today is a continuation of that. Now, today is a perfect summary of the gospel. This is the second time we've seen a summary of the gospel in John. The last one we looked at was earlier on in chapter 12, verses 23 through 28 was a really good summary of the gospel. But Jesus, his last proclamation publicly to the people is the gospel. So it's important we hang on this. We should know this. As Christians, sometimes we need to be reminded of this because we like to hang a bunch of other stuff on it. So today we're going to be reminded of what it is. Now there's two major themes that run through the chapter, all of chapter 12, actually through the gospel. The first major one is belief in Jesus. The second one is his mission from God who sent him as a divine envoy, as a representative, as an agent for who he is. It's Jesus' final charge. Let's jump into it, take a little bit at a time so we can get the most out of it. Verses 44 through 45, that's John chapter 12, says this. And Jesus cried out and said, "Whoever believes in me believes not in me, but him who sent me. And whoever sees me sees him who sent me." Two things, believing and seeing there. To believe or see Jesus is to believe or see God. They are one. Jesus is God revealed. In fact, God has most clearly revealed himself through the person of Jesus Christ. Now we think about the ways when we read our Bibles of how God has chosen to reveal himself. God, utterly different, not human, utterly different, utterly transcendent, has revealed himself many different ways. In the Old Testament, we see God revealed himself in the garden with Adam and Eve, his presence with them. Then to a family that would birth nations, and then a nation that would birth a Savior. Now, we think about who Jesus is, and we think about words like agency. And agency in our culture is a good word to use because what it means is representing somebody else. It's somebody else's interests ahead of my own. It's not self-serving. It's I represent somebody else, or the agent represents somebody else. Now, at this point in our scripture, the Hebrew people believe in God. Oh, they believe in God. Make no doubts about that. They vehemently believe in God, and they're going to protect that belief and their traditions and how they be with God vehemently. In fact, they'll kill for it. Now, they read the scriptures. They heard the voice of the prophets that spoke for God. And they know that he, God, promised to save them and the world. But when it comes to it, when it comes right down to it, their words seem to be just lip service. The crisis moments in our lives reveal what we actually believe about God. It's easy to say I believe in God when it's 70 and sunny. And there ain't a lot going on in my life that is rocking the boat too much. But when I lose something valuable, when I'm at my wit's end, when the world around me is failing because it is temporal, when those relationships that I put so much stock into fail because those are temporal too, when my life is in crisis, that is when I learn how much faith I really had in God. These Hebrew people are there. They're at this moment. They're being oppressed by the Romans. They're in crisis. But when it comes down to it, in spite of all the evidence, all the miracles that Jesus is performing, all the fulfillment of the prophecy Jesus is fulfilling, all of that, when it comes down to it, they seek the glory of man above God. In fact, last week we talked about that, and John was very specific and said that they believed, but they wouldn't confess it, for they liked the glory of man more than the glory of God. They sought it. Now, Jesus, in the very next verse, uses light and darkness again. This is several times he's gone back to this analogy. Verse 46, Jesus is still speaking. He says, I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. And we see the truth and we come to believe. Light reveals what darkness hides. Listen, light reveals what darkness hides. When you go into a hospital, you expect that it's going to be nice and bright, clean and sterile. We expect that in our culture. We go in there and we want to see things. We want there to be light so we can see that it is clean and sterile and safe. But when we go into an old bar, it's dark. It's hiding the uncleanliness, the dirt. Restaurant 101. I don't want people to see the filth, so we dim the lights. Now, we don't want to know that it's not clean and sterile. Not knowing helps us remain in the darkness. People used to say that if you saw how they make the hot dogs, you wouldn't eat them, right? If you're like me, ignorance is bliss because you love hot dogs. And I don't want to know. I don't want to know how they make them. It doesn't matter to me because maybe if I did know how they make them, I wouldn't like them. I probably still would. I'd probably eat one while they're making them. But the point is, sometimes our willingness to stay in the darkness is actually in ignorance of something we already know. Paul calls it a suppression. That we actually know the truth, but we suppress the truth in unrighteousness so that we can remain in our state. Now, seeing ourselves in light of what Jesus did tears all that down. It doesn't produce a judgmental heart. Rather, it should produce a heart of compassion. And we say things like, but by the grace of God go I. So that when we look at our brother and sisters who's struggling with some certain sin, we don't judge them. We say, that could easily be me. But God. That's the heart that's produced and the one that's really changed. It's not this high church, high view, high judgmental state that we often get shackled with by culture. They look at Christians and they put that label on us that we do this to the world, but that's not really true. A heart that's changed is a heart that's full of compassion. And you look and see people stumbling around in the darkness and you say, I was in the dark too. I know what it's like to stub my toe in the dark. I know what it's like to grope around. Now Jesus here reminds us that he is there to save them, not judge them. Verses 47 and 48 says, if anyone hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him. For I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. Listen, the one who rejects me and does not receive my words has a judge. The word that I have spoken will judge him on the last day. Jesus goes from Redeemer to Judge. Hears my word and does not keep them. Listen, hears my words and does not keep them. Think of the people last week we talked about that didn't believe because they sought the glory of man above the glory of God. That's who Jesus is talking to. Jesus says, I don't judge them. He came into the world that he might save it. The very idea that God sends people to hell assumes something that we need to get right. The very idea that God sends people to hell assumes they weren't going somewhere already. It assumes that they had no destination. Nothing could be further from the truth. My family and I love to be on the water. Being in Michigan, we know that we like to be on the lake. In fact, we love to go boating. One of our favorite things to do is pontoon around, and we'll float over to the sandbar, we'll anchor down, we'll get out, throw the frisbee back and forth, crank the music up, and just have a good time at the sandbar, and maybe lift up the anchor, go back over to get some ice cream and maybe some lunch or some dinner, and then back to the dock. The cool thing about a lake is you can go wherever you want, whenever you want. You can go to the sandbar, back to the sandbar, to the dock, back from the dock. And then something else we like to do, we haven't done in a while, is canoeing. Raise your hand if you've been canoeing. Yeah, it's a fun time, unless you have small children and a dog. Then it's a lot of work. The thing about rivers is they can be hard to navigate. One time we were canoeing, and my daughter had her own kayak, and she lost her oar. And she kept floating down and finally got to the bank, but her oar was upstream. Being the dad, I had to get her oar because I didn't want to lose my deposit at the canoe rental place. So I had to go back and try to get that. But the harder I tried to swim upstream, the less progress it felt like I was making, because I wasn't making any progress. It didn't seem like the river was flowing, but it had a deep current. The harder I struggled to swim or paddle up current, the more I just wore myself out, the more frustrated I became, the more I swore off canoeing at that point. See, I had to get out of the river and walk around to get the oar to be able to give it back to my daughter so we could keep on going down the river. Now, the world says life is like a lake, that you can go from point A to point B anytime you want, whenever you want, and have a good time. But we need to say to people that life is more like a river, not a lake. See, the world says that you're hanging out at the sandbar having a good time, and actuality, you're moving downstream. See, today you're a day older than you were yesterday. No matter how hard you paddle, you can't go back to yesterday. You are headed to a destination. And at the end of this river that we're on is a waterfall. A big waterfall. I want you to imagine you're headed down the river, and some guy named Jesus standing at the bank, and he tells you, "Hey, friend, there's a waterfall upriver." Maybe he tells you it's a mile up the river. Maybe you got 5 miles. Maybe you only got a quarter mile. Maybe the waterfall's imminent. The world says, don't listen to him. Here, buy this. It'll help you go upstream. It'll make you feel younger. It'll make you younger. It'll remove those wrinkles. It'll give you vigor. It'll make you look and feel younger. Maybe this guy has been trying to get your attention from the bank for a while. You know he's there. You can hear him at the bank, and you can see him in the peripheral, but you don't want to look. The world says you don't have time to look. Stay focused on what's in front of you. The waterfall, though, you believe, but you don't believe in waterfalls. So they don't really affect you. You don't think it's even possible that there is a waterfall. And it's okay if other people believe in waterfalls. I mean, that's fine. It works for them. They can believe in waterfalls. It really doesn't affect you. You don't really need to believe in them because your canoe ride is going pretty well. It's nice and dry in there. You have a nice canoe. You're enjoying the scenery around you. Or maybe you acknowledge that there is a waterfall. But the world says by the time you get there, it'll be fixed. After all, the right person has been put in the right place, in the right office, and they're going to take care of that waterfall. It'll be gone before you get there, and you don't have to worry about it. You put your faith in those that promise to take care of the waterfall. The idea that God sends people to hell is as silly as my analogy is. God sends no one to hell. You're already on your way. You're already headed there. You're on a destination, a path for a destination. Jesus acknowledges two groups of people here. Listen very closely, because we get it wrong in the church a lot too. People who hear and try and fail. If anyone hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge them. People who reject the very idea that they need a Savior are like the Pharisees. I want you to imagine teaching your kids how to swim. We've all probably done that, or most of us have done that. And we're in the pool, and we're very comfortable in the pool. As a dad, teaching my daughters how to swim was very important to me, because they were to fall in the water. I wanted to know that they could get to the edge and survive. But you're in the pool with your child, and your child's scared because the water can easily overtake them, but you're not scared because you can stand. The water only comes up to your waist. So put your child in the water and you let her go. You say, just paddle to me. Well, I can't, I'm scared. No, just paddle to me. Trust me, if you knew that I could touch, that this water doesn't affect me like it affects you, you can trust me. Jesus is not saying be perfect. He's not saying be perfect at all. He's saying paddle to me. Paddle to me. I'm standing right here. This water doesn't affect me like you think it affects you. You can trust me, but I just need you to paddle to the bank. You don't have to go down this river. You don't have to go to the waterfall. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to paddle to me. I'm here. I'm here for you. Some will. Some will paddle to the Savior. Most won't. Most people will not. But everyone gets to the waterfall. Everyone does. 49 and 50 says this: for I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment, what to say and what to speak. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. What I say, therefore, I say as the Father has told me. The source of the authority that Jesus is speaking of is the very Creator himself. He is the Creator. This is the gospel. This few verses is the summation of the beautiful gospel that God stepped into his creation to live a life you and I can't, dying a death that you and I deserve, restoring a relationship he didn't reject. We have to reject it. Incredibly profound. Let's do away with the notion that we're not going anywhere. We must do away with the notion that God sends people to hell. He doesn't. He's trying to keep you from going there. Next week, we're going to see how Jesus does something that only servants do. He's going to wash the feet of his disciples. Beautiful picture for each and every one of us. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity just to dig into your word. Father, John tells us some beautiful truths. May they mean something to us in a new way today. Your gospel, what you did for each and every one of us, your children, Father. We ask that those that are on the fence and are struggling and don't know this yet, that their heart would be softened and they would accept that and know that today in a special way. It's in Jesus' name we ask these things, and everybody said, Amen. Let's all stand together and respond and worship.